Now then, Emma James is joining us now for a look at the French newspapers. Of course, in the main news, we've been talking about the elections, and not surprisingly, the French papers and all the online reaction talking about the same thing as well. After a less than glorious performance from the Socialists in yesterday's elections, what kind of reaction are we seeing in the left-leaning press, first of all, Emma?
Well, if we take a look at Libération now, it says UMP on top, National Front consolidates its position, and the Socialists struggle in the first round. These, of course, are the departemental or local elections, really seen as not as important as some other elections. We've got those coming up in December 2015 and, of course, the presidential elections in 2017. But these really are taking the political temperature of France right now, and it is an interesting time to be taking that temperature. The editorial in Libération talks about resistance. The sweeping tide of change didn't happen, it says. Of course, the National Front was predicted to get 30% of the vote in these elections, and they didn't quite manage that, more like 25, 26%. The other parties also did better than expected. Now, according to Libé, they believe the spirit of solidarity following the terror attacks that happened in Paris back in January has actually driven people to go out and vote for more traditional parties, and not for the politics of division of the National Front. Now, they say a quarter of voters, though, still went for the party that wants out of Europe, to close its borders, and leads with the politics of division.
And a lot of the column entries in the newspapers you found, haven't you, taken up really with right-wing successes, both from the UMP and the National Front as well, of course. But some choosing to lead instead with rather damning indictments of the Socialists, who really have not done well at all, have they?
Absolutely. They've not done well at all, and they've not done well in the coverage in the press either. If we look at the magazine L'Obs, they condemn the left, calling it the most stupid in the world. They say it failed to gather its strength as the National Front threatened, and say that it was both a tactical and a moral fault. Good news, according to L'Obs, though, is that the turnout was higher than the last local elections that we had back in 2011. According to L'Obs, the French left has never learnt the lessons of the past, and the UMP and National Front can be complacent about their new position out in front. Now, the Communist Party newspaper L'Humanité's front page declares this election result is the punishment of François Hollande and Manuel Valls. With just over 20%, the Parti Socialist has been heavily punished, it says, for its politics of austerity. Now, inside the paper, there's an editorial entitled "The Power Stumbles." It describes the vote as a reflection of the profound discontent of France and the French people who were made promises and feel they've been betrayed by the party. It also talks about a massive abstention rate, with around half of the electorate not voting. But of course, as we've already said, there were more people out at the polls than back in 2011. So the abstention rate perhaps not as much of a talking point as it might have been. The paper describes the population of France as disgusted, looking for an alternative and refusing to be duped.
OK, well, that's what those newspapers are saying. Now, what's being said right at the other end of the spectrum, should we find out, in the right-leaning papers now? How different, if you like, is their take on the success, albeit a slightly smaller one than predicted, of the National Front then, Emma?
Well, the Figaro, on its front page, you've got the Socialist Prime Minister Manuel Valls catching a rather lonely figure in the image that they've chosen to use, separating him from the other leaders. Almost 30% went to the UMP and its allies. Latest polls, that's according to Le Figaro. Those figures, though, seem to have been updated now. The latest polls have the right securing 32.5% of the votes, are doing even better than had been expected. If we look inside the paper, it says France now has a political system comprising of three main parties. Of course, it's really only been the Socialists and the UMP party that have been leading the charge in political terms in France. But now we have three main contenders. The results did deliver some disappointment to the Front National, though, they point out. Nicolas Sarkozy coming out as the big winner. No great surprises there. We all knew that pretty much as soon as the exit polls came out last night. The president of the UMP, and of course he embodied this whole election campaign. He really led from the front and has been a very visible presence throughout, which is quite surprising given that he wasn't that popular when he was in power himself. Exactly, yeah. It is quite a turnaround. François Hollande saw a bump in popularity in the wake of the Paris terror attacks. He was seen as something of a comforter-in-chief, if you like, of the French people as there was this sort of rally for solidarity. But his popularity that he gained then has dropped away, and it appears to have gone in the direction of Nicolas Sarkozy. Now, the paper here says that the big danger that he could have actually been overtaken by Marine Le Pen as the big opposition to the French president, that's now been avoided. Now, elsewhere in the paper, it looks at the success of the National Front, saying it had a record number of votes in this election. Marine Le Pen has called for the Prime Minister Manuel Valls to resign, saying this is a vote of no confidence by the people of France in his government. She is remaining confident that she will secure that 30%, which proved elusive this time round, in the presidential polls in 2017.
OK, still going to be very exciting, isn't it, when we get to the second round? Of course, this time next week we'll be reporting on those, won't we? And, of course, those elections, as you say, in 2017. Emma, thanks a lot. Emma with the French newspaper. She'll be back in a couple of hours' time with the international ones, of course, here on France 24. And if you didn't catch a few minutes ago, when did we give them to you? 25 minutes ago now. The exact results of those elections, we'll have them for you in just a few minutes when the news is back with you here on the programme.